Hi, welcome back to World History by a Jew. I'm your lecturer, Seth Fleishman. This is the second part of our mini-series, the Samson Mysteries, where we take a look at biblical Samson and then see how he fits into real archaeology. But on top of that, this is also our grand finale of our Bronze Age Collapse series. So we're doing a mini-series to end the series. We've been doing Bronze Age Collapse for a few months now, and I wanted a special way to end it, so we're ending it with its own mini-series. Let's jump right in. So in our last lecture, we covered Greek history, Egyptian history, and Levantine history, all in about a 30-minute span. So for those of you who didn't see it, I highly recommend you see the last lecture before you watch this one. But if you did not, or if you did watch it and just need a quick review, actually, we covered so much material, maybe it's good we all go through a quick review. So let me cover our key points from our last lecture. Number one, when we talked about Greece, we talked about the myth of King Danos, how he fled the Levant / North Africa, landed in Greece, and he opened up trade and communication and cultural exchange between Egypt and Greece. He also brought several inventions. Two that I highlighted in the last lecture was the Pentaconter, which was the main Greek ship. When you picture the Greek ships of that era, that's the Pentaconter. And also the Phoenician alphabet, right? The Phoenician alphabet begot the Greek alphabet. So here it is, this one guy, King Danos, is given credit in the Greek tradition to bringing them both of these inventions. And then we have the Denyen people, and the Denyen people are descendants of King Danos, according to the Greeks. Let's move on. Egypt, we looked at the Denyen sea people to start us off. And we first went to see if we could find earlier records of the Denyen people, and I identified a couple occasions where it seems they were mentioned in Egyptian records, maybe just by a slightly different name. And then we talked about the main invasion during the reign of Ramses III, when this mass of sea people came in first by land and then by sea, and some of these sea-born invaders were called the Denyen, and we talked in detail about the Denyen. And then my main point in all this talk of the Ramses III invasion was to make the point that the Egyptians identified the Denyen people as being grouped with the other people from the Aegean, most specifically the Philistines, but they looked like the Philistines, they fought with the Philistines, they came with the Philistines, they're even grouped in the sentences with the Philistines, so that's an important point. Last we talked about the Levant, and specifically we looked in detail at an Amarna letter from Tyre, and so the king of Tyre is writing to the pharaoh of that era, mid-1300s, and he's talking about various cities around Tyre and what's going on, the diplomacy of the land of Canaan. And then he mentioned the Denyen people, and we mapped everything out. And at the end, I said that the Denyen people he was talking about was in Adana, which is a region of Turkey in Cilicia, if you prefer that, but we're talking about southeastern Anatolia. So we ended with number one. Egypt's Denyen sea people were equated with the Denyen people mentioned in the Levant. Number two, these same Egypt's sea people called the Denyen were equated with the Greek Denoi. And then number three, the Denyen, the Denyen, and the Denoi, all being equated now, were then placed in Adana in the area of southeastern Turkey in modern terms. So this was a big statement, and believe it or not, this is actually ended up going to connect to the story of Samson in the Bible. And now this was the last slide we were on in the previous lecture, and this is when I ended that lecture, I pointed out that here's the Denyen people that's talked about in this Amarna letter, and I'm putting them right here in the map. Now this red is where these different cities in red that were mentioned, and I mapped them all within this rectangle. But this was really to lead us to the point that the Denyen people are in the land of Adana. All right, so let's move on. What we want to do is we're going to zoom in right where this purple square is. See this purple square? I'm now going to give you the Google Maps version of this purple square. All right, so that's next. Here we go. So Google Maps. So this is now, so you see up here how this map ends with Latakia. Then here's Latakia down here. So here to here. So I just want you to kind of get your bearings. So I'm heading north. This square is north of this red rectangle. So we're heading north through Syria into modern Turkey. And now we're in Adana. By the way, there is a province of Turkey named Adana and a city named Adana. That's why you're seeing the duplication here. So what can the Adana region tell us? How is we going to equate this with our Denyen? And for that, we're going to take a look at the archaeology. Now, I've talked a lot about Egyptian archaeology. We've talked about Greek mythology. Now I'm ready to move on to Anatolian archaeology, and we're specifically the Luwians and what they left us. And so let's take a look at, okay, first off, what's Lubian? So Lubian is an ancient language of Anatolia. There are several languages, but they all fall under this Anatolian language group that both Lubian and Hittite are a part of. Lubian being the largest and Hittite being the second largest, although Hittite is much better known. If you look at this map at the bottom here, it gives you an idea of the difference. Lubian is an Indo-European language, which means in a roundabout way, it is related to Spanish and English and German. There's just no Lubian speakers anymore. So the Lubian language was spoken in the bottom half of modern Turkey, so the bottom half of Anatolia, and almost all of Western Anatolia as well. So you have the West and you have the South. So when you see this map, it's like almost 3/4 of the map is covered with Lubian speakers. Not too bad, right? Lubian was used roughly from about 2000 BCE to 600 BCE. So Bronze Age and Iron Age, but it is an extinct language now. For tonight, we're really going to be talking about the scripts and one script in particular. So in my last lecture, I talked about Linear A, and it is not proven, but there's indications that perhaps Luwian was written in Linear A. And if you want to know more about that, go to lecture Z14, Who is Amalek? There's also Luwian was written in cuneiform, and it was a modified form of cuneiform, but it was based on the old Babylonian cuneiform. But what we're focusing on tonight is Luwian hieroglyphics. And Luwian hieroglyphics are not the same as Egyptians. In fact, you don't have to be a specialist to see the difference. They clearly look different the first time you see them. They were a native Anatolian logographic script. And be ready, you're going to have several prime examples tonight. Let's get going. A few archaeological finds in Anatolia. Our first inscription for tonight is the Karatepe inscription. And it was a big, big deal at the time. I'm calling it the Rosetta Stone of Luwian hieroglyphics. By the way, I'm not the first person to say that, but it's just the best way to express how important it was. It was discovered in 1946. It was by an archaeological excavation headed up by the University of Istanbul. So they're excavating this Neo-Hittite fortress at Karatepe, and this fortress was dated to the 700s BCE, but it had a very short life. And within this short life was this inscription. And that's right here where this red X is. So there was this bilingual inscription that was found. It was written in two languages. One is Phoenician with the Phoenician alphabet. Remember, the Phoenician alphabet looks the same as the Hebrew alphabet at this point in time. Second, we have Luwian hieroglyphics. Now, even by itself, the discovery of the Phoenician alphabet would have been significant because it was 61 lines long. It was the longest ancient Semitic inscription ever found. Why? Well, because the alphabet was on writing materials normally, right? You didn't have inscriptions with Hebrew. They'd be very short if it was a Hebrew or Phoenician inscription. But if it was going to be long, then it would be on parchment or it'd be on papyrus, something that that disappears over time. But this was an inscription that of 61 lines. Right beside it was a Lubian hieroglyphic inscription that matched it. So the Phoenician was a known language. We now, for the first time, I don't want to say a lot of Luwian inscriptions, there was an educated guess to what they meant, and those educated guesses were fairly good. But this was the first time you had language to language, and what was known about Luwian could then be matched with a known language. And it did add also to the corpus of Luwian knowledge. So it allowed Luwian to truly be deciphered and verified for the first time. So this is a big, big moment for scholars of ancient Anatolian history. Now, there's a lot more to that, because it gave verification that this Denunim people, the Denuna, had settled in Anatolia. Number two, here's Mopsys. Mopsys I talked about in the previous lecture, the one who is Amalek, which was Z14. He had a cameo appearance. He's only going to have a cameo tonight too, but one of these episodes of this miniseries is going to be entirely about Mopsys. What you need to know about Mopsys tonight is he became the first Greek mythological character, person, hero, whatever you want to use, the first Greek mythological person to be verified in the historical record. So myth became verified reality for the first time with the Karatepe inscription. So let's take a closer look. Here's the inscription. I don't have the entire thing, but I think these two images, this really gives you an idea of what it looks like. So on the top here, you have the Phoenician inscription, which looks like ancient Hebrew to those that are used to studying biblical history. And then at the bottom here, you have Lubian hieroglyphics, which clearly looks different than Egyptian. You don't have to be an expert to see that there is a difference. Now, the inscription refers to a king who is a ruler in Adana, a ruler of the Denunim people, and a descendant of the house of Mopsys. Okay, first I need to say you're going to see the A's in parentheses. Why is that? Because in Lubian, when it's written in Lubian, there is an A before the D. But when it's written in Phoenician, there is no A. It just starts off with the equivalent of the letter D. Here you have this Denunim people in archaeology from this inscription, both as what it seems to be a kind of kingdom, and another that is, or a land, and the other that there's a people called the Denunim. And then this king claims to be a descendant of the house of Mopsys. So this Greek character. So let's think about this. Let's stop for 1 second and think. We have an inscription in Phoenician, so a Semitic language, which I'll get to the timing of it in just a minute. We have a Semitic language talking about this Greek character. Then we have the Lubian language, an Anatolian language referencing this Greek character. So all of a sudden you have these two languages coming together and telling us that the royal family of the Denunim consider themselves descendants of Greek royalty, which is very, very interesting to say the least. The dating on this takes us to the 700s BCE, as I said earlier. Now, more specifically, the forge has been dated to around 740s BCE, which is interesting because this would have been right before the Assyrians took over Adana, right before the Assyrians invaded Cilicia. Okay, now I want to talk about another inscription. So we're going to go back to our map, and I'm going to point out another one of these archaeological discoveries. So now we're going to talk about this one at Synopsis. So right here, you have the purple X, Synopsis. This is where we were before. We were at Karatepe. Now we're at Synopsis. So this was discovered much more recently, just discovered in 1997, but really the studies weren't done until the 2000s. So we're talking this information we're going through tonight is 20 years old or so, maybe even less. It's a statue with a bilingual inscription on the base. And again, two languages. You have Phoenician script and you have Luwian hieroglyphics. But this is a little bit different. This is a statue. It's a statue of a storm god, and he's referred to in Phoenician as Baal, right? We talked about Baal a few minutes ago, or Tarhunza in Lubian. Both of these characters would be identified as storm gods, generically speaking. The inscription further verifies Karatepe. Why? Because once again, we have the reference to the Denyen and that they were in this area. Secondly, the king claims to be a descendant of the house of Mopsys. Let's take a closer look. So here is this is the statue, and then the inscription, I kind of zoomed in here. So this yellow rectangle is up here. That's the zoomed in so you can see. Just wanted you to be able to see the hieroglyphics underneath there because that picture didn't show it so well. So let's look at what this tells us. We're talking about this king who is he says grandson, that's really descendant. And the Phoenician is a little bit clearer than the Lubian translation. So we see that he claims to be a descendant of Mopsys, right? And he's king of the Denyen people, right? He's from the land of Dana or Adana. Okay, and then I looked down at this last line. This last line references the king of Assyria. Now, we didn't have a reference. The only kings referenced in the Karatepe inscription were locals, so to speak. There was a couple kings in the Adana area that were referenced. Whereas when you move on to Senekoi, the Senekoi inscription talks about the king of Assyria. So basically, this king of the Denyen is saying that he was a vassal of the Assyrians. So this is a very important hint. Why? Let me pull up the next slide. Basically, Karatepe has been dated to the 740s BCE, whereas Senekoi, the one here, is dated to the 720s. What is the difference between those 20 years? Well, that was when the Assyrians took control of the region of Adana. So it's great that you have like this snapshot of Karatepe right before the Assyrian invasion, and then you have the Senekoi inscription right after the Assyrian invasion. The Assyrians probably, almost certainly, were the ones who destroyed this Karatepe. So they destroyed this fortress city and left us this great souvenir, this great inscription to find. But then 20 years later, you have this other inscription created, which now the king of the Denyen is a vassal of the Assyrians. Great stuff, right? Okay, I've got a couple more I want to show you because we have to bridge a gap too. We have a little bit of an issue that the Bronze Age collapse was circa 1200 BCE, or if you want to say 1177 BCE, and then we had to jump all the way forward and go to the mid 700s. So what in the world has happened during this 450 year period, right? We need to find a couple of different inscriptions to help us out a little bit. One is the Arzuz stelas. So the Arzuz stelas, which if you look here in the blue, so they're down here. So we have Karatepe, the first one, Senekoi, the second one, and now we're down here to Arzuz. Now, Arzuz is just Luwian. But what's great about it is it goes back a couple hundred years. So now we're in the 900s BCE that this one's been dated. We have this King Supaluma, which is not the King Supaluma you know from our Egyptian discussions. This is another king who clearly wanted the name of this more famous Hittite king. And he was king of this region called Palestine. Some call it Palestine, which is another story in and of itself, because there are some scholars who believe that there was another Philistine kingdom and that it was in what's now modern Turkey. I don't want to get to that now, and it's not part of our stories now. So I couldn't pass it without mentioning it. But the most important thing about this inscription is not what it says so much as its dating, that you have this king Supaluma. He refers to a region called Adana in Lubian, and remember it's only Lubian, so you're going to have the A. So he refers to this region Adana, and it's dated to 200 years earlier than our last two inscriptions we looked at. Then I want to look at the İncirli stela, and that one is way up here in the corner in black. You may have missed it. So it's way up here in the corner. And this one is trilingual. So what makes it interesting? We have Phoenician, we have Luwian, and this time we have Assyrian records, and it's very poorly preserved. Let me see, I've actually got a picture of it. So you can see that only with image enhancement software have they been able to read this inscription. Really doesn't look so great anymore. But anyway, it's interesting because you have 3 languages. So you have now a 3rd language. And what is this 3rd language adding to it? Well, it's reinforcing this idea that you have the Denyen people, you have a city of Adana, and that their leaders came from the house of Mopsys. So more reinforcement, but now in another language. It marks the Hittite land that was gifted by the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser, the same guy in the Bible. Okay, so he's a very famous individual. Here we have a extra biblical source, and there's plenty of them, but I'm just saying that this is one of many extra biblical sources mentioning him. Now let's go down to the last one, and I've got to change my map here to show you the last one because it's off the map. The Sibilaris Prism should be mentioned because it's going to help us triangulate a location later. So this one, what makes it interesting is it's a Phoenician inscription. Let me go to it. It's a Phoenician inscription, but it's far west of the others. All right, so now we're talking about the same king. The same king is a Senecoi, this king who's the king of the Denyen, who is a descendant of the house of Mopsys, and now we have him leaving this prism for us to find way, way west of these others. So everything else is bunched up over here in the east, and then we have this one way west, right? So these are our Lubian archaeological discoveries that are going to help us pinpoint the Denyen people, connect them to the Denyen people. So we're going to come back to this, but what I want to do is summarize with what we've learned so far. First, forgive me, I'm going to redo again. After the Bronze Age collapse, southeastern Anatolia was home to the Denyen people in the land of Adana, and they were ruled by a king who claimed descent from a Greek mythological hero named Mopsys. What's the connection? We have people who are etymologically matched the Denyen, which is one of Egypt's sea peoples, right? They're at an attested location, which means it makes sense archaeologically where they are. They have an Aegean connection. They're very proud of their Aegean connection, or at least their leaders are, and they can be seen to be there at the right time, but there is a problem. Let's think back to our Egyptian inscriptions. What's the problem? The problem is the Denyen were in their isles. Okay, in their isles. So the questions I'm going to leave you with tonight are, where are the ships and where are the isles? And those are the important clues we'll come back for next time. So that does this for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you see, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends. If you want a little bit more information, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll be happy to add you to my weekly email list. And I look forward to seeing you back in, we'll say, 3 to 5 days, and I'll have the next lecture ready to go.